Hi there, everyone. So welcome back. Fabulous session there, extremely interactive from Samira. And our next speaker, who I'm just going to pin so we can stay together, there we go, is Andrew. Now, I'm going to actually say a few things, and then I'm going to ask Andrew to introduce himself. So Andrew's going to be speaking to us about men. And the reason I really felt that this topic was important in this conference is in my master's, in my PhD, in many other areas, I've read, I've experienced, I've watched webinars, I've researched so much about women and gender, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And yes, there are research areas out there about men. And personally, I don't think there's enough. I'd love to know Andrew's view on that. And the work Andrew does is enabling and supporting men to be at their best, to thrive, and to achieve their potential. Andrew, say a few words about yourself in terms of who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you, Claire. My name is Andrew, and I'm here in the UK, and predominantly I'm a coach for men, although since I declared that as a specialty, more and more women have reached out to me, so go and figure that one out. But yes, as Claire says, I work with men to enable them to be the best version of themselves, to flourish in whatever it is they've chosen to do. I've got a longish career in doing other things besides that, so predominantly working in the pharmaceutical and life sciences industry. But the whole time I was there, I was far more interested in the people side of what I did than the work itself. And now, like Claire, I'm a coach too.
Thank you. So, Andrew, should we get started with a few wacky, crazy, unusual questions? How's that?
Goodness me. All right. So yes, hit me with some wacky questions. Go on.
So it's, what time is it in the UK now? We're
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock UK. Okay. So mid-morning on a Friday in the UK. What's the weather like for you? There's an easy one.
Well, I got caught out with how warm it is this morning. It's dull and windy. But I took my dog out and I had a coat on, and it was one of those where you get back and you're like, yeah. So clothing errors happen in the autumn here quite a bit. You just can't get it right.
Changing so many times a day in the UK, absolutely. And for us here, I'm in Qatar. There's gorgeous blue sky. There's a really giant green tree out the window, so the colours are amazing, and a slight breeze. So in terms of your work, Andrew, what's a metaphor for the impact you want to create in the world?
That's a great question. I would say unboxing men. I switch between unboxing and unfolding because I think that society that we've come acclimatized to has an effect on men from when they're boys, actually, in education and conditioning, that if we're not really careful can basically fold us up into a tightened mass, right? And a lot of men out there are struggling with identity and finding their way in the world. So the work I'm doing is unfolding these men.
I love it. I love it. It sounds so much about, pre-framing, reframing, deframing, discovery. Yes. So what brought you into this specific area? And I did a bit of research. There are not many coaches focusing on this niche.
No, there aren't. and more's the pity, actually, because there are coaches for so many different niches, but I think men as a group get a little bit neglected here because it's not particularly cool or fashionable to be helping men with things. I would say that the niche chose me. Not really sure why that's happened, but I just found that for the most part, it was men in their midlife that were reaching out to me. And to start with, in my coaching practice, these were men that I'd had some interaction with over my working career of 20 odd years. You know, we might have been colleagues briefly or worked on the same projects. And, you know, they remembered how we were together and how I made them feel in the moment of just passing the time of day. So that's how the niche came about, really.
And what challenges, especially recently in terms of COVID, are men facing?
That's another great question. I would say the COVID situation, the pandemic, has been a massive amplifier for a lot of stuff. So, you know, we've all found ourselves at home more. We've all found ourselves around our loved ones more, and we've come to appreciate different ways of working, and we've got different perspective on what that work is. So the challenge is actually acknowledging that, you know, how do I feel about the life I had before all this kicked off? What do I think about it now? And the challenge for a lot of men is acknowledging that it's different and that something has to change. Knowing deep inside that it's already changed. So it's almost that the major challenge is looking that in the eye and acknowledging that there's a change.
I think there's a fabulous coaching theme around that is generic as well, in terms of recognizing, admitting almost, and then naming. And once we can connect with it, that allows us to move forward into behavior shifts and opening up of possibilities.
Yes, exactly.
So with the pressures on men, I absolutely loved watching your video in terms of the responsibilities on a man's shoulders. And of course, none of this is ever saying that women don't have these responsibilities. We are just for now focusing specifically on men. And I think the important thing for me is that is absolutely okay.
Yeah.
So say more about the responsibilities.
Well, I want to echo the point you start with there, Claire, in that, of course, I'm not saying that women don't have responsibilities to think about. Of course they do. But if we think for a moment on how men are seeing the situation, you're right, make quite a heartfelt LinkedIn post about the day that was 2 days ago when my youngest son turned 18. I've got 4 kids between 18 and 23, so they're all adults now, technically, legally. When I wasn't particularly happy in my work some years ago, I was really thinking about the pressure and the load of being a parent and providing for a family. But as I say in the post, I think I was confusing that feeling of being burdened and pressured with actually the burden of not being very happy in the work I was doing, and how long would I be able to sustain it to provide for my family. So there's a mixed message, I think, in a lot of men's heads out there, that the burden and the responsibility isn't in fact the family, it's the burden of keeping going, doing things they're not happy doing. And I see that a lot in the men I speak with and coach.
And in terms of that, what was it that really enabled you to be who you're being in the world and to focus on this area? For example, were there any critical incidents, personally or professionally, or significant others that guided you into this area?
Yes.
I can see you smiling there.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us go through our careers not really knowing what we're doing in terms of the next thing. and there's a lot of pressure on us to somehow make our situation better by moving to a better paid job or something with better prospects. And I certainly did a lot of that. But one thing I did notice over those years was that I really enjoyed the people side of what I was doing, and I guess the caring and helping side of what I was doing, more than the actual work I was supposed to be doing. So, running a sales team or being a management consultant or whatever. I suppose the critical time or moment for me when I realized something was twofold. The first moment was when I actually had some coaching for the first time myself, when I was at a low point. I'd just been made redundant without expecting it. And my wife encouraged me to speak to a very dear friend of mine called Simon Dawson, who he's a coach at Medtronic now. Lovely guy. And I used to work with him a long time ago when I was in medical devices. And my wife Sally said, give Simon a call. He's a coach, isn't he? Perhaps he can help you. And yeah, within an hour, I felt radically different to how I had been feeling about my situation. I had different perspectives I didn't know I could find. And I never forgot that experience. So when a later employer asked me, Andrew, would you like some professional development, in the way HR tends to do, offering courses and things? I said, yeah, I'd love to learn more about coaching, actually. What's possible there? And they kindly supported me in learning the required certifications to be a coach. And from the very first moment I entered a training room, and you'll know this yourself, Claire, having had the coaching training, it was completely different. Experienced in a training environment, and I just felt immediately at home, like I'd always meant to be in that moment, helping people in that way. So I never really looked back from there, and when the chance came to do it full time, I jumped at it, and here I am.
For me, that resonates completely in terms of being in coach training. In fact, if I could, I'd be in coach training every day of my life. It's just gorgeous and warm and deep and thought-provoking. And when I deliver coach training, I'm thinking of certain places where the hotel, I've even flown in and sent a map of how I want the room, and they still put tables out there.
That's just it.
Yeah. We need tables.
Yeah.
We don't want barriers.
Quite. Yeah. I remember it so well in that there I was, a corporate guy, used to, as you say, tables. Where's the agenda? Where's the PowerPoint deck? Where are the handouts? And instead I was greeted with, as you say, a room with no tables in it, and a lot of very excited looking people, mostly women as it happens in that setting. And I remember walking up to one of the facilitators at the time and saying, oh, what's the deal here? Where are the handouts? Where is the PowerPoint? And she looked me in the eye very calmly and said, Andrew, how much structure do you need? And completely floored me. And yeah, but very shortly after that, we were into, exercises in, coaching and awareness. And I remember one of the first ones where you sit across from somebody, 3 feet apart, and you spend, I think it was 2 or 3 minutes just looking into their eyes and saying nothing. And then seeing what you notice about that other person. And it was a really crazy experience for someone coming at that from a corporate environment where you don't do that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
In that 3 minutes, you don't know somebody at all, but you know them completely. It's a very strange thing.
I think there's that, and there's so much self-discovery into, different cultural aspects as well. How long is it okay, if at all, to keep eye contact? And we become so self-aware. So when you are working with men to enable them to achieve their potential and be happy, which is so important as well, who are you being?
Oh, I'm just being myself. I'm being over there with them, I think. That's the thing, isn't it? When we're coaching somebody, you experience a bit of a shift in that your attention is as full as it can be on another person. So I'm hyper aware. Every single sense in me is on fire, and I'm noticing everything I can in service of helping that person move forward. So whether it's what they've just said, how they've said it, what they haven't said, minor changes of facial expression, it's all one big, feast of information that I can replay and help that person with. So yeah, most of all, I'm being excited, Claire.
And I know you love your work. It just oozes out of, your posts and you here right now. And you talk about being yourself, and what I love about that is it brings in Gestalt. When we be more of ourselves, I totally believe we are happier human beings. What's your take on that?
Yes, I think there's a lot of energy that gets consumed when we try and run in emulation mode, I call it. I don't know if any of the audience remembers in the early days when you used to be able to get a Macintosh to run Windows. It never worked all that well. It's a bit like that for us if we're trying very hard to put energy into something that we're not comfortable doing. It, it's not a happy situation to be in. So that's a neat metaphor.
So when working with the men that you have, are you able to share with us some success stories?
Goodness.
And of course, success is such an exciting word in itself.
Yeah. So I think the most amazing ones really are where someone publicly says, this is the first time in my life I felt comfortable in my own skin. So when we think of success, we think of attainment of a goal, don't we? I got the job, or, I relocated to a new country. And yes, of course, I'm coaching men through those sorts of things, and they go on and achieve wonderful career changes and what have you. But the one that sticks with me, or the ones that stick with me, are where somebody has finally decided that they're okay with themselves and they don't have to compete anymore. They don't have to try and control the sea of the life that they live in, and they can instead surf it happily, just being in their own skin with a smile on their face. And I don't think you can put a price on that.
Totally. Yeah. I'm thinking just then, as you were speaking, I was coaching someone, and it was for supporting an ICF chapter. And this session, I knew the person I was coaching very well because we'd been on a CTI leadership program together. And a lot of it was about the end. People were commenting, well, that's an easy answer. When actually, for this person, to ask for help was not an easy answer. It just looked for some of the observers like, obviously that's a solution, and we could have thought of that without all this coaching stuff. And yet it was this stuff underneath the iceberg, which is the amazing discoveries when we get to know ourselves even more. Yeah.
I think that's true. It's easy to focus on the tangible, right? The achievement of a promotion or a career change, or, something you can stick a flag in, as I call it. But beyond the attainment of a personal goal, the broader stuff lasts longer. So, if you're finally comfortable in your own skin, if you're finally able to take a decision and be okay with it, if you finally know what your strengths are. That's a really interesting point, actually. A lot of people wonder, what is my strength? Where is my mastery? Where is my passion out there somewhere? And, when people realize that there's a passion that was inside all along, or when they realize that their mastery is the fact that they've got enormous range and they can do a ton of different things quite well, and that's their own version of mastery. To see that, to see that being realized is really special.
Mm. So from your experience of working with men, say something about permission to fail.
Oh yes, wow, permission to fail. We don't do ourselves any favors with that in our educational systems, I'd say. It's seen as a bad thing and not useful in learning and moving forward. So when that permission arrives, you know, life looks very different, doesn't it? Because sure, the failures happen, but it's rather like the surfing metaphor I used earlier on. It's a lot of fun because, you know, there you are on the surfboard doing whatever it is you're doing, and the failure is falling off and refining your technique and learning it a little bit better. So, you know, if we can just adopt a surfing mentality towards failure, I think that's a huge step forward, rather than, you know, trying to control the sea and swim against the current.
Yeah, in flow. So what's coming up for me now is also resilience, that resilience to get back on the board, try again, try different ways to see what lands.
Yeah, and, you know, it's a beautiful metaphor actually, because you know that life is going to have its peaks and its troughs and its stormy bits and its flat calm bits. So when you're in the worst of it, you know that eventually the conditions will change, and you've got a choice about how you respond, how you look at it.
So let's stay with this theme, and I'm thinking here about riding the waves. If there was 3 top tips that you'd give to senior men, well, any men at the moment, what would be the 3 top tips for them to be able to confidently and resiliently ride those waves?
First, I think is a letting go of something, letting go of the need to control the sea that they're in. That's where energy is lost, right? So having all of your bodily effort involved in trying to control your environment for the betterment of what you're trying to do is extremely tiring and actually never ends well. So if you can turn your attention to, even if you're just body surfing to start with and you haven't got a board, that's something, right? Rather than, you know, swimming against the current. So letting go of the idea that you can control everything is what I'm saying there. Appreciating the humor in a situation is also extremely beneficial. It's a dark time we're in at the moment around the pandemic. So trying where you can, in the limited social interactions we get, to see the funny side of things and see the lighter side of things is enormously helpful and life-giving. And the final thing I'd say is it's very easy for us all, men and women, to get wrapped up in our own situation, our own thoughts, our own consternation. If we can put ourselves over there with somebody else for some time, whether it's your family, your kids, or your work colleagues, there's a wonderfully lightening effect from doing that. Just taking the attention off your own predicament for a few moments and being over there with somebody else opens things up. You know, we coaches are lucky that we get to do that so often.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, shall we see if there's any questions from the audience? Would you like to take your mics off? If you don't want to unmute yourselves, then put your questions in the chat and I will ask Andrew for you.
I'll do my best.
Always takes a minute for people to be typing. So a few people are unmuted. Soraya, any questions? So I've got loads of questions, Andrew.
That's good then.
If there was one dream for you for the work you're doing, what would be the biggest impact you want to create in, let's say, the next 10, 15 years?
great question. Where do you get these questions from, Claire? Well,
I'm a coach.
yes. Never get interviewed by a coach, everybody, because they'll get you. Well, I think the biggest impact I can ask for is if I can get the men that I reach and the men that I touch through the work I'm doing to have anything like the same levels of self-awareness that I see in most of the women I coach, then that's a massive win. Right? You know, the whole folded up thing that I talked about at the start, you know, men aren't so good at this stuff, this introspection, this noticing things about themselves. Women seem to be able to do it. And I don't want to make this a gender thing particularly, but it's just true. Women seem to be able to communicate better, you know, verbalize things, externalize things better, because I suppose they haven't had the same conditioning that it's not good or cool or okay to do that, right? So the more I can encourage men to do that work and, you know, in still a very masculine way, notice things that are going on about themselves and then act upon it, then that's a massive win and all I could ask for.
Beautiful. And it is work and it is a journey and it is ongoing. I feel that things, you know, to support that, we did a session first thing today about reflective practice, and I can't underestimate the value of journaling and then to look back at journals over time. And all the top business schools totally advocate using journaling as reflective practice. We tend to give our clients a reflective journal for their coaching journey as well. There's one other question in the chat box here from Dr. Mohammed. What is the difference between men and women coaching?
So I want to clarify that. Dr. Mohammed, do you mean men and women as coaches or as it relates to coaching men versus coaching women? Perhaps you can clarify.
Let's see what he says.
Okay.
As coaches.
I think it's more the differences I see are more around the situations and the preoccupations, so the things on their mind. The actual behavior as coaches, I don't think is radically different at all. I just think it's more about the situations that they present with and the things that they're concerned about tend to be different. I think that women, when I'm coaching them, they're tending to come to me with much more personal things related to their own innate self rather than how they feel about a situation in their life. So men will turn up and it's a, you know, a major concern about career or, you know, the direction they are or where they think they should be at this stage in life. It doesn't tend to be the case with women. It's much more about, you know, personal qualities and their impact on others and everything else. So that's what I've noticed. Don't know what, I'm interested to hear what you say, Claire, too, obviously, as you coach men and women too.
Yeah, so I'm really curious about my own thinking around this, and I think there's so many other variables. Age, the position people are sometimes in an organization, or the stage of their life. So not so much maturity in terms of age, but maturity and awareness. And then also social class is a massive one to me. I find that area fascinating. And then also religion can play such a part in coaching, especially with the work I've done across the Middle East. And there's cultures within cultures. And the way that men and women, for example, say a few words from the Quran in Arabic and then translate so I can understand. And that's part of the coaching session, which is beautiful. I think I agree with you, whether it's true or not. I'll explain what I mean. I agree with you that on the whole, women appear to be more self-aware. And the reason I say it like that is because there can also be a parallel process. And I remember the first time that I was working with 3 senior CEOs in a country in the Middle East, and I was flying in to work with them. And one is the CEO of the stock exchange. And this is about 8 years ago. And I remember that flying in and the feelings that I was going through. Gosh, this will be an interesting 3 days, and they're all in finance and all the things we make up. And it was 3 men. And when I got into the room and we started, these 3 men had gone to school together. Were really good friends. And just by saying that, and you laughed, so you know that the layers that I didn't know also impacted that coaching. And it was a beautiful, deep, amazing discovery 3 days. It was really quite humbling and fascinating, and all that thing around ditch the assumptions. And also, I'm sure you'll agree, Andrew, coach the person and not the issue. And I feel, on the whole, that when I'm coaching women, they go more to the person easily, whereas men tend to look initially more at the issue. What's your take on that?
Yes, I totally agree with you there. Yeah, so there's a change of mindset sometimes required when men are coming for coaching, in that they're very quickly looking for solutions to feel better about life. And what's the solution going to be to that? So in my intake discussions that I'm having before I work with somebody, I've got to make some distinctions there and say, actually, look, I'm not going to give you advice. I'm not going to solve this for you. I'm going to help you see things you can't currently see about yourself so that you can come up with some solutions. Not everybody gets that. So yeah, it's a very good point you make.
And then the other thing I'm thinking about, in terms of contracting, have you noticed any specific nuances or differences in the initial contracting and also the ongoing contracting that takes place with men or women?
Yeah, interestingly, men are seeming to take a little longer in filling out my initial questionnaire. Like most coaches, I've got a fairly punchy questionnaire of 25 questions or so that enable me to get an understanding of where that person is in their life, so that we've both got something to react to when we start working together. And I think most of the men are taken by surprise somewhat about the questions that are being asked, and it takes them a while to come up with the answers that they want to share with me. So the women I've worked with seem to be able to do it much more quickly, without such an effort.
And in terms of the way we are as, for example, parents and teachers and HR, OD, L&D, all these areas, in terms of the way we are with men, what more can be done to support men?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
A chunky one. I've got to think about that. Well, let me draw on some experience I've got of running group coaching for men. So I run groups for men where 8 men who don't know each other spend a series of meetings together over a course of 10 weeks, rather like we are now, only there are just 8 men there. And we're working through various topics, right? But yesterday I coached a group of men around a topic of women, ironically. So you can imagine that 8 men who don't know each other that well have got interesting things to say about the questions that arrive with them around women. And one question I always ask is, what is it that you want women who don't know you that well to know about you? And almost universally in every group I've ever coached in this topic and that question, the men say, I'm safe, I wish you no harm, and I wish you well. That's the thing that a lot of men want women to know.
Wow.
So what I'm really saying here is assumptions about men are all over the place. Men's assumptions about themselves and other men are all over the place, and it's really not helpful to make these assumptions. So yes, there are men out there that behave inappropriately, and it's disgraceful, and equally there's a vast majority of men out there who don't. So there's work to be done in getting rid of assumptions across the board, across genders, across borders, across races, across religions.
Absolutely. Breaking down the barriers, uncovering the truth.
Yeah.
Breaking cycles. Brilliant. So curious about the group coaching you've mentioned. I remember I was group coaching a few years back, a group of female Saudi entrepreneurs, and the learning for us all was just absolutely beautiful. That thing of, I'm being paid to do this work and I get so much learning out of it. It's, what a fabulous career we're in. So there's that, and also the way that one topic that one person brings forward and the others learn different perspectives, and it's going on here whilst also being being spoken about as well. Are you able to share any of the other topics that come up in terms of group coaching with men?
Yeah. So the way that I've set this up is that the men don't know each other at all. They're invited to be part of a crew, essentially. And I'll let you into the secret as to why it's a crew. A rowing crew has 8 people in it. And on Zoom, like we are now, if you're in gallery view, it works brilliantly because you've got a 3x3 area and you can see everybody at once. So I stuck with 8. It's a nice number, but the men don't know each other. And I have a charter, really, which is like a set of ground rules for this container of the group coaching, in that you are a man, you are different to a woman, but you're a man. You have in this crew, this setting, no status, no role, no title, no career behind you. You're just a man. And you come here prepared to share about your life, your perspectives and your experience across a number of topics, and to learn from your fellow man here. And with that no judgment container set up, men speak freely about what they think on different topics. So we start with career usually, because most men can talk about that without too much of a problem. But we do it with the caveat that it's not, oh, I had this job and I worked in this place and I got this title. It's, well, how do you feel about it? What was it really like for you? What have you noticed in doing that work? So those sorts of questions. And it's good training, that first topic, for maybe some more challenging topics like, family, relationships, health, finances, all these different other topics, things that are on the minds of men all the time. And we dig into them as a group. And just like you're doing with your questions, Claire, I pride myself on asking some pretty spicy questions to get people really thinking about the topic in a different way.
And what I love for that is when people actually realize that there's patterns that show up in other areas of their life on behaviors they may want to shift or change.
Yes, that's very true. And it's actually really heartwarming as well, the camaraderie that happens when you've got guys that get together that first week. They don't ever meet, of course, in real life. They don't know each other at all. But over the course of 10 weeks and having a group on WhatsApp, there's a lot of sharing that goes on. And typically you've got, people in Asia, people in the US, people in Europe, all at the same time, like we are now. So it's a wonderful thing.
So here's an interesting question. So ICF's new core competencies that are out there, and we work with them from January 2021, they've removed the word intimacy. One reason, because of the translation into different languages and misinterpretation of intimacy. So what way does intimacy show up in these group sessions?
Well, that's
In what way would you define intimacy?
that's a corker of a question, isn't it? I suppose I didn't know that. I guess the concern with the ICF is that there's connotations of, things that are, between a couple, right? Or,
Correct.
sexual proximity or whatever. But it's only one interpretation of the word. So intimacy is like proximity or closeness. And you have to have closeness and proximity in a coaching environment for anything material to happen. So, maybe if you want to rename it as connectedness, it might be an easier way of digesting it across cultures and everything else. But without that connection, it's very difficult to be either a coach or be coached, I would say.
I saw once the word intimacy, and it was just with a few hyphens in it, and it was written to be into me see, and I found that fascinating. So intimacy, yes, we lean in to others, but we also, it's a way of reflecting into ourselves as well, which is beautiful, really.
Yes, yeah, it's that's another way of actually saying the very true sentiment that you can't do coaching to somebody. You have to be open as a person for that coaching thing to happen, right? Yeah, you've hit on something there, Claire, in that it has to be a two-way thing, or even in a group setting, right? You have to have presence and connection with whoever it is that you're working with.
Partnership, yeah. So let's see if there's any questions from the group. Any questions, please do unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat box.
I have a question, Claire.
Rom, hi, how are you?
I'm fine, Claire. Thank you for asking. Andrew, how do you define an ideal man?
Wow, what a question. I don't know if I do. I don't know if I do, Rom. I can't think of an ideal man, because I'm not sure such a thing exists, and if he did exist, whether I would want to meet him. I can't help feeling we'd all somewhat inferior to him, wouldn't we? Why do you ask that question? I'm intrigued.
Well, how would you know if a man has reached his full potential? Basically, maybe that's what I know.
That's a great question. Well, I guess the clue is in how he is with you and how he made you feel when you spent time with him. Is it possible to reach your full potential? Probably not, right? Because we've got so much untapped reserves of ability, capacity to do things, to feel things, that all we ever do is taste different areas of that and show up with what we've learned. So I think there's nobody out there that's ever reached their full potential. But we set the intention to explore as much of it as we can. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Thank you.
How much do you need the support of your wife?
Me personally, a lot.
Yes.
A lot, yeah. I got married when I was a very young man. So yeah, I was 19 years old when I got married, which is unusual in the UK these days. But yeah, we are very codependent on each other for a lot of things. As the marriage has stood the test of time, if you like, because we're still very happy together after nearly 30 years. So yeah, it's a partnership.
How do you coach, or what do you say to men who couldn't win the support of their wives?
Couldn't win the support of their wives. Well, I would start by asking them how they see the relationship. you know, obviously the wife in the picture isn't in the coaching relationship. I'm only coaching the man here, but I would ask him to look very much into his perspectives on it, and start there.
I think that's a really important thing you've pointed out there, Andrew, as well. If it's any coaching around relationships, it needs the 2 or more people actually present in the coaching. And we have another question in the chat box from Valeria. In terms of the group coaching sessions, do all the 10 sessions have predefined topics?
They do, just to give the guys a chance to think about it in advance, right? Although no 2 sort of iterations of that topic are ever the same, because of, you know, you've got 8 different men every time I do one of these crews, so how they look at the topics vary wildly. My favorite question out of all the ones I ask is actually in the topic of women, because I get some wonderful answers to this question across cultures and across age groups and everything else. And the question goes something like, you've survived a plane crash as a man and the only other survivor is a woman. What assumptions are you already making about your role here? You should hear some of the responses.
That's an awesome question.
Yeah, I don't know how I came up with it, but it definitely gets them going, right? And it, you know, they get quite animated. And what's surprising is, you know, you might think the majority of men will be coming up with, oh, I want to be the sort of protector and make sure everyone's okay and all the rest of it. And quite often it's, oh, I really hope that she's a Bear Grylls in disguise and she can look after me because I'd be scared, you know. So men have the capacity to be very surprising in how they think of things, and I think that's something to be celebrated.
So there's also an element, I imagine, from you in terms of self-managing as a coaching competence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And ditching those assumptions ourselves about the people we're working with.
You're right, and it can be very difficult to get rid of those, because assumptions can get clouded by judgments, which themselves can get clouded by, you know, intuitive feelings that you might have about a situation. They all sort of bleed together, so you have to be quite careful, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions before we have our short break before the next session?
I wouldn't mind another question if you have time.
You're very welcome.
Go for it.
I have an opportunity to do some group coaching with a group of school administrators. And I'm wondering if you'd have any advice, because it's around the topic of inclusion, diversity, and equity. And just in terms of how to start with that group, since I'm not familiar with them, we haven't built any intimacy or connection. I'm walking into it cold, really.
Okay. You could ask them a bunch of questions where it levels the group playing field a bit. So it doesn't matter really what that individual school administrator's background is, he or she would feel able to contribute to a discussion. So having the first meeting really be off topic, and perhaps about how they've been thinking about, you know, joining this group, what they hope to get out of it, what assumptions they might be making about everyone else in the group, all things that help them, you know, become a bit more relaxed about the prospect of being with you in that space for a period of time.
Thank you so much.
I love that as well, because one of the most fundamental things is we're all human beings. We've all got opinions that we can all share, which is beautiful. Andrew, that's been an absolutely fascinating and fabulous 50 minutes. There's a lot of F's there. Fascinating and fabulous 50 minutes with you. Is there anything you'd like to give us as a gem before we take our break?
Oh, I haven't got a pre-canned gem. But just thank you for the opportunity of spending this time with you and for the questions, and to you, Claire, for your wonderful questions. I should have known you'd come up with some really good ones. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think what you're doing here is a really good thing. And I think you've got tremendous stamina to keep going for so long, 24-hour period. So just thank you, everybody, for being part of this. And it's been fun.
Thank you for being with us. Great session. And if you want to put your details in the chat box, your choice for anyone to contact you with further questions, you're very welcome to.
Okay, yes, I'll put my email address in here if it helps people.
Brilliant. And we now have a short break until the hour, and then I know Tristan